So you're thinking of selling your home in Calgary. Let me ask you a question. What if one small mistake in the contract, one small thing that you casually agree to ends up costing you tens of thousands of dollars, weeks of wasted time, or maybe even the entire transaction? I see it quite often where sellers get excited and before you know it, they've agreed to something that really backfires on them. So in this video, I'm going to go over the top things that I probably wouldn't agree to do if I was a seller in Calgary. Let's get into it. All right, so let's start off here with the first point, and this is meant to be more of a bullet point video. And the very first point here is if you're a seller and you don't understand how dual agency works, I probably wouldn't do it. Now, dual agency, also called double ending, is when the listing agent also has the buying end as well. So they're doing with buyer and seller at the same time. Every year I do a double end some properties, not many, I'd say less than 10% of all my transactions have been double ended. For me, I just follow the rules and there's no problem whatsoever. But there are some bad agents out there who might put their own interests ahead of yours. They might tell the buyer what price you'll accept or vice versa. So you just have to be careful here that you have the right agent that will put your interests ahead of their own. Point number 2 is accepting a small deposit. Now, this is an easy one. Like say, for example, you're selling a $1 million property and the buyer wants to give you a $5,000 deposit. I'd probably just say no. It's not enough to keep the buyer in the transaction if things go badly. So say, for example, like the buyer has removed all the conditions and possession is 2 months out. Maybe they find something better and they just walk away from their $5,000 deposit. It's not enough to keep them kind of in the contract. And maybe you've bought something else and you're depending on this buyer to close on this transaction and now you can't buy the next home. It's just a big hassle. And this almost happened to me just a month or two ago. So this does happen in real estate. So if you are selling it, make sure the deposit is enough to keep the buyer in the contract. And point number 3, letting the buyer have vague terminology in the contract when it comes to repair demands. So maybe they want something done and they write up a term in the contract. It's just so vague and it's open for interpretation. This could really backfire on you, especially if their lawyers get involved. It could get ugly. So when there's something that has to be done in the contract, make sure that it's very specific. You know exactly what has to be done, the dollar amounts if possible, and what happens if it's not done as well. Just be very specific. Think like a lawyer. Avoid vague terminology in the contract. Point number 4, avoid long condition dates in the contract if possible. So for example, this just happened to be like a month ago. I was on the buying end and my buyers wanted like a full month for conditions, for home inspection, financing, and that's a very long time. Like a home inspection takes 2 to 3 hours and most mortgage people can get the transaction approved in like 4 to 5 days. So it shouldn't take a month. And on the selling end, if you do this and your home is tied up for a month and you can't really sell to anybody else, you can accept maybe backup offers, but a lot of buyers won't be interested in writing a backup offer. You could be tied up for a month and then that buyer could just back out. Maybe the financing was declined or they found some issues in the home inspection and you wasted a month of your time. So quite simply, I wouldn't be too interested in having a long condition timeline if possible. And point number 5 is the sale of buyer's home clause. Now, in a red hot market, I would probably just avoid these contracts altogether. This is when the buyer submits an offer to you, but they have a clause in there that they have to sell their property as well. Now, in a red hot market, you simply don't need these buyers most of the time because there's a ton of buyers out there. When the market's red hot, there's like lineups, there's unconditional offers. Calgary was like this from like 2020 until about this time last year. It was kind of like this. Right now, things have balanced out, but when it gets hot like this, you just don't need these buyers and it'll tie your home up forever. And it's a lot of uncertainty. So I'd probably avoid these in a red hot market. Now, that said, I put tons of deals together like this. In normal markets or in buyer's markets, the seller is more accommodating. But if the market's red hot, I'd probably just avoid these altogether. And point number 6, agreeing to verbal agreements that aren't part of the contract. Again, this is very easy. If it's not in the contract and in writing and signed off by both parties, it doesn't exist. So don't count on anything being verbal. Make sure that it's signed and on the contract. And point number 7 is overlooking the fine print in either the purchase contract or the listing contract. I find this is a big one nowadays. Before the days of electronic signatures, it was easier to go over everything in person with the buyer or the seller. But nowadays, people just click, 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 and they don't actually read the contract sometimes. Not everybody, but a good chunk of people are like this. And if I was going through this process as a buyer or a seller, I'd make sure to understand the contract and understand exactly what you're getting yourself into. And point number 9, agreeing to risky possession dates. Now, this could be an extra long possession date. So right now it's September. and maybe the buyer wants possession in like March or April. This stuff happens. I had one deal maybe in 2017, 2018, where it was like a February, and the buyer wanted October possession. So the stuff does happen. It's unusual, but it does happen. And if you are the seller in this case, you're going to want to have like a good initial deposit, and maybe after all conditions are removed, have an additional deposit as well to keep the buyer tied to the contract. Because maybe 6 months goes by and the buyer changes their mind, or they lose their job, or who knows what happens, and it's a smaller deposit, they just walk away from the transaction. So again, deposit can be an issue, and a long possession date can also be an issue if you're not careful. And the next point, allowing the buyer early access to the home for possession. Now, this is just a big liability. Maybe the buyer moves in early and they don't like it. They change their mind and they back out before the funds transfer at the regular time of closing. Maybe the buyer's truck doesn't fit in the garage, or maybe they damage the property. There's just too much liability to allow the buyer into the property early. So I just probably avoid this. And I'd keep the buyer out of the property altogether unless they have a walkthrough in the contract, like a day before possession is very common. But once the deal is firm, I would probably avoid having the buyer come back into the property unless they have little terms in the contract for like measurements and tradespeople and stuff like that. I think it's just a good habit not to let the buyer back into the property until the actual closing date. Next point, allowing the buyer to assign the contract to somebody else without the seller's permission. Now, this is not such a big problem in Calgary. I do hear about this in places like Vancouver. This does happen in the new build sector of the Calgary real estate market, but not so much the resale sector I'm finding. But still, yeah, I'd be mindful about this. I still wouldn't allow it unless you agree to it. But I'll leave it at that. Not a huge thing in Calgary. Point number 11, if the buyer has to delay possession, make sure there are consequences for it. So say, for example, the buyer has to delay for a month. Maybe that buyer has to pay the mortgage or the condo fees or the taxes. Make sure that it's actually benefiting the seller as well. And the buyer just can't do this unilaterally. And the next point, I would say negotiating with the buyer with things that are not part of the regular purchase contract. Maybe the buyer wants to include a car or furniture or like just stuff like that, personal belongings. I would keep that out of the contract. The mortgage brokers and the banks hate that, and sometimes they even decline financing because of it, or they force us to take it out. So make sure it's just the property and the regular inclusions like, fridge, stove, dishwasher, washer and dryer, window coverings, the regular things. I would not put other things into the contract that are kind of unusual, because it will get flagged by the banks and it might not work out in your favor if you do stuff like that. But if there are things that the buyer and seller want to negotiate on that are not part of the contract, feel free to have like a side agreement, but keep it out of the purchase contract because the banks don't like that. And the next point, this one's kind of unusual. If I was a seller, I would just ignore like the for sale by owner companies, the slashed commission, the brokerages, just because I find that the commission helps to sell your property. If it's like the evenings or the weekends where it's minus 40 outside and somebody wants to show your property, the commission helps that agent get to work. They're excited to get to work and show your property and make some money. If there's no commission involved, odds are they're not going to answer their phone. They're just going to, blow off that buyer. That happens all the time. So I think commission does solve many issues in real estate. It just helps sell your property. Next point, number 15, I would probably avoid signing a long listing contract in Calgary. I would say for the most part, 2 to 3 months is more than enough time. I wouldn't be signing a 6-month contract unless it was a property that was like, $3 to $4 million, a small buyer pool. Those properties do take longer to sell, but your typical home that's, 400 to 600,000, I think 2 to 3 months is more than enough time. And if it's priced well, they can still sell in the first week on the market. So I would just say, 2 to 3 months is normal. Anything longer than that, I'd probably just say no if I was a seller. And the next point, when it comes time to accepting an offer, I wouldn't just accept an offer on blind faith because the agent is telling you it's a decent price. I would ask them, hey, can you send me some comparables? Can you show me why you think it's a good price? Just maybe ask them a bit more evidence as to why you think it's a good price versus just accepting it on blind faith. And the next point, allowing the buyer to make modifications or repairs to the property before they've actually taken possession. So I had this about 1.5 years ago where I was on the listing end and a buyer wanted to come in and paint the property before taking possession because they were a painter by trade, and for them it made total sense. But for the seller, there's just too much liability. I would just say no. What if they damage the property? You're stuck with that bill. What if they damage the property and they don't want it anymore and they're going to walk away from their deposit and now you're stuck with the property and trying to sell it again? Just too much headache, too much hassle and liability. I would just say no. Next point, let's talk about some financing options. Now, in the past, I've been presented by seller financing from different mortgage brokers who've come to my office and they're talking about different, packages. If you don't understand it immediately, I would probably just say no. There are situations where it can make sense, but I think for most transactions that are like resale, I would say it probably doesn't make sense. And if it's hard to understand and you don't get it immediately, I would probably just say no when it comes to seller financing and some of the options like that. And the next point, regarding home inspections, it's quite common that the buyer will send like a huge list of repair requests, or they want $10,000 off the price because of certain issues. Very common. But I wouldn't be negotiating with the buyer blindly. I would ask them to send you a copy of the home inspection report and do your own due diligence. Make sure that the cost they're asking for actually makes sense. And the next point, agreeing to finishings or design changes as part of the contract. This just gets too confusing. So if I was a seller, I would just say no. If you're like bargaining over like the color of the sink or the chandelier or window coverings, it gets super annoying and it makes the contract difficult. I don't think the banks like it either. I would just tell the buyer, do this on your own time when you take possession. That's how I would handle it. I just find it super annoying to be, going back and forth with the buyer regarding like the product type or the color or the size. It's just super annoying. I'd probably avoid it if possible. And the next point, allowing unvetted people into the property. Now, this isn't super common, but it does happen where random strangers can just knock on your door asking to view your property without having an agent involved. I think there's some security risk with this. So if I was a seller, I'd probably just say no, book an appointment with your agent. We're more than happy to accommodate showing requests. And I would leave it at that. I wouldn't be letting strangers into the property. And the next point, if you can avoid it, I would probably avoid these fit tests where a buyer wants to park their truck in the driveway or to test out the parkade. There's some liability and risk with this. I've had it one time, a long time ago now, where the buyer wanted to test if their truck could fit in the underground parkade in the condo complex. And it barely fit by like a millimeter. And it looked like it was going to tear off the garage opener. And I'm sure that you don't want to be involved in that risk, and neither do I. So I'd probably avoid this if possible. Number 25, avoid having pets in the property during showings if you can avoid it. This is beyond me, but some people think it's their right to bring their pet wherever they want. And I've seen people bring pets into show homes and stuff like that. I would probably just say no. What if they damage it or they have an accident here and there? Just not worth the headache and the cleanup. So I just say no if possible. Next point, hiring a realtor that's inexperienced because they're your friend or your relative, or hiring a realtor that you know that doesn't work in your market. So you want to make sure that you're hiring a professional that knows your market. And this does happen quite often. I've been guilty of this myself, where I've taken listings in places like Olds, where I'm not that familiar, but I'm trying to do a friend a favor. So I think if I was a seller, I'd probably hire someone that has the market experience, not just because they're your friend, and make sure they have market knowledge of your area as well. And the next point, this is more of a red hot market issue. So in a red hot market, the first day or two, you get tons of showing requests, like lineups. You get unseen offers, unconditional offers. And if you're about to accept an offer, I would make sure to ask for a pre-approval letter in a red hot market. Just because what happens is you get the buyer that, they offer a crazy amount, you accept it, then it turns out they get a bit flaky and they just back out. And then you've lost all that momentum. And it's hard to get those buyers to come back to the property. It's hard to have that same kind of drama of the first day in the market. So it could cost you a lot of money by accepting an offer without having vetted the buyer a little bit better. Again, this is more common in a red hot market, not so much in a balanced market like we are right now. But it can be very costly. And the very last point here is regarding holdbacks. So what a holdback is I'll give you an example. Say you're a buyer, you write a contract, and it turns out after home inspection that the fireplace is not working or the plumbing has an issue and there's a leak, and you want this repaired before possession. And if it's not repaired, there's a monetary holdback of say $1,000 that's released to the buyer where they can do the work themselves if the seller doesn't do it. Now, if the seller does do it and they provide evidence, this holdback is null. That's kind of like the gist of a holdback. Now, if I'm a seller, these holdback amounts have to be realistic. If they have like a $10,000 holdback for a plumbing leak, I would just say no. The punishment has to fit the crime. So in this case, if it's a plumbing leak or furnace cleaning or professional cleaning, I'd say the holdback amount no higher than say $2,000. It has to be enough to make the seller do it, but it has to also be enough to fit the crime, if you get what I'm saying. Well, there you go. That's my take on the things that you shouldn't do as a seller. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you are a buyer or a seller out there and you could use some help, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to be a resource. You can call, text, email, or comment. I will get it and get back to you. And I've also got some free resources in the pinned comment, a buyer's guide, seller's guide, and a relocation guide, all free for download. Again, feel free to reach out. I'd love to help you out, and I will see you on the next video.